Like I said, I want to start with An Se-young because I think that's one of the big stories. There's one other that I'll get to later. But for me, the big thing when it comes to An Se-young, obviously she was able to win this tournament. Going one better than last year. She also meant that by winning this 750, Super 750 in Denmark specifically, she has now completed all of the Super 750. She's won all six of those tournaments. And if you add the fact she's won all four of the Super 1000s, she's won the World Championships, the Asian Games, and the Olympic Games, she's pretty much completed badminton. I'm not quite sure what events in the Super 500s that she has left to complete. Obviously, there's going to be a few that she probably won't ever play again, but who knows if she might go hunting to try and complete that. Obviously, I don't believe she's won the Asian Championships and she hasn't won the Sudirman Cup, a team event, but she has been a part of a winning Yuba Cup team. So for the fact that she's only 23 and done so much and now has won all the 750s, and I think she is the first player to do that, that is absolutely incredible. One incredible performance. Also, by winning this Denmark Open, she's become the first Korean women's singles player to win the Denmark Open in 38 years. Again, she is constantly striving, pushing forward, breaking boundaries, setting records, and creating firsts for her country. She is an absolutely fantastic athlete, and she demonstrated that with the way that she played all the way through the week. I did talk about a little bit there that there was a few odd matches. I think in her quarter-final against Miyazaki, she lost the opening game relatively comfortably and then won really comfortably. She did the same in a semi-final against Akane Yamaguchi. And it seemed possibly in the final that it was going to go that way, but it wasn't. I'll come back to the final in a second. But before I get into her performances, I specifically want to focus on her semi-final where she beat the world champion Yamaguchi, and obviously in the final where she beat the player that beat her in the final last year, Wang Ziyi. But before I get to any of that, obviously the big thing that stuck out to me is what a difference a year makes. We only have to cast our mind back to the 2024 Denmark Open, and I think the video I did, the Beckman's breakdown, that was a special because it was all about An Se-young, because all the headlines were about her, and not necessarily positive because obviously the Denmark Open came a couple of months after the Olympics where she'd won gold, and then she basically blasted the BKA talking about how how they treated her, how they mistreated her injuries, how they were making her wash up, do the laundry and all these other archaic things. Obviously that all came to the forefront, and then what we saw at the Denmark Open where she was snubbing her coach, she's snubbing Sung Ji-hyun, and I can't quite remember his name, but he was the head coach of Korean badminton at the time. That was obviously dominating the headlines. I think her knee injury wasn't in great shape. She definitely wasn't in great playing shape last year. She was obviously not personally making the headlines for anything too negative, but there was a lot of the story around it. The story around the whole Denmark Open was pretty much all centered around An Se-young and her relationship with not just her coaches but the BKA. This year, it's like night and day. Not only was she in much better form, obviously she was able to win the tournament, like I said, beating the player that beat her last year, but obviously she is in a much happier, much better position. Her relationship with the coaches, I saw an Instagram story by her, thanking a team, the big team that is behind her. Obviously the coaches have changed. I know I think Ronnie, who's still behind her coach. Someone mentioned that he's now with the junior team, but I think he's still involved. But obviously, the head coach has changed. It's now Park Ju-bong. The chairman of BK is now Kim Dong-moon. And behind An Se-young's court was also Lee Hyun-il, who was a fantastic men's singles player. So lots of things have changed. And so, like I said, what a difference a year makes. Absolutely fantastic. I've already gone through what a performance it was, and obviously the records she's broken and the achievements that she's achieved, completing the World Tour Super 750 events, winning all of them. In fact, the Denmark Open was the last one, obviously, that she had to win. She's actually won every single other one, including the French Open, which is going on this week, twice. So maybe she needs to win the Denmark Open again next year to round that all out, then won all the 750s twice. But enough of those achievements. Let's talk a little bit about the actual badminton that she played. And like I said, I want to focus more on the two matches, specifically the semi-final against Yamaguchi and the final against Wang Ziyi. Now, against Yamaguchi, I did see a post-match interview after I'd made notes, obviously after I'd watched it, and it kind of confirmed what I thought that Un Young changed, because she lost the first game relatively comfortably. I can't quite remember the scores, but then she came back and won very, very comfortably in the second and the third. And for me, the big change was in the first. It was a little bit like what we saw at the Korean Open. Yamaguchi was attacking, playing with lots of variation and lots of confidence. But to be fair, Unseung was allowing her to do that. She was playing on the slightly faster end, Unseung, so maybe she was struggling to get her length. So she was hitting a little bit slower, because obviously if you punch through it with the drift, it could carry it. So sometimes not only do players hit short at a faster end, but they tend to hit a little slower too, which is obviously a deadly combination. And Yamaguchi was absolutely flying. She obviously is playing some great badminton herself at the moment. But then obviously after that first game, I think going to the slower end definitely helped An Seong. But one thing I noticed, and this is what she did in the China Masters when she beat Yamaguchi, was it in the final or even in the semi-final? But she came out far faster was one thing, but more specifically her speed and her push and effort to get onto the front court. Yes, she attacked a little bit more, she attacked more accurately as well, which obviously helps things, but she put a massive shift, a big effort in pushing up the court as fast as she can, taking that shuttle at the front of the court early, which basically does a couple of things. Obviously, one, it allows her to get the attack that little bit more, but two, it didn't allow Yamaguchi to attack, or if it did, she had slightly less time. She was under more pressure, and you could see that Yamaguchi was getting less chances to attack. So when she did, she might be forcing a few, and you could kind of see in Yamaguchi a little bit like I saw at the China Masters, the belief in her that can she win this slowly drained from her. She was still trying, she was still putting the effort in, but I think the way that Unseong just took the front court, won that battle. We always talk about the front court battle in singles, and I spoke of this at length when I was commentating at the BXL, but it isn't just a straightforward like you just take the early net. Or you just get the attack. Sometimes it can be other layers, like it stops your opponent from just being slightly more unbalanced to attack, or it allows you to be better balanced in defense and or have more options. There's lots of things to winning the net battle. It's not just as clean cut as if I win the net, I'm going to get the attack. Obviously, that is one of them, but it's not that. And I think An Seong did that absolutely brilliantly. And like I said, you could see if you watch that match back as the match goes on, Yamaguchi's belief that can she win this, can she create chances, just starts to kind of fade from her. So I think for Yamaguchi, she's my favorite player. She needs to go away, and obviously, what worked in Korea was, the attacking game. That is definitely the game that's going to be effective. That's definitely something that even Unseong's coach Park Ju-bong said could potentially be a weakness to Unseong, is when players come at her, and you're starting to see more of the top players are trying to take it to Unseong, and that's definitely the game plan. But if Unseong is able to counter that, not by necessarily attacking herself, but pushing up and really working hard in that front court area, then that can take away. And obviously Yamaguchi's going to have to go away and go, well, what happens if Unseong doesn't allow me to attack as easily? How am I going to re-win the net? How am I going to counter what Unseong's doing? But yeah, no. And like I said, Unseong in an interview afterwards said that she just upped her pace, especially moving forward, and that was the deciding factor. And yes, no, absolutely incredible. Well, last thing I'll say about Unseong and Yamaguchi, and this is one thing I couldn't help but think about, is because these two played each other in the final of the Denmark Open. I think it was 2021 final, and it was the one where Unseong ended up basically almost dead, and it was a real slugfest. I think it was another year where the shuttles were very slow and the games were that. But just watch the difference between these two players. Obviously, the game wasn't as close, but the level, the speed, and the attack that both players are playing at is far, far higher. For me, that's a good example of the direction that women's singles is going in. It is becoming far more physical. You have to be incredibly good athlete to be able to play, and you have to be able to play and attacking. You can't just grind. Obviously you can kind of grind out odd matches here and there, but in general, again, you come against like players like Ansuong and Yamaguchi, the two of the best players in the world right now. There needs to be more to it than that. Now in the final, following on from that, actually, is for the first time in the whole tournament, I know Unseong had, I think, the slightly slower end, so maybe slightly easier, but her attack, her game came out, she came out incredibly fast. And in fact, actually, I wrote here in my notes that she was playing a little bit like her coach, Lee Hyun-il. I think I've compared Unseong and the way she moves to Chen Long. She kind of glides around, she wins a lot on her quality, her very good accuracy, her great defensive skills, and she can counter quite well. Like Chen Long's not known for like blistering attack, although he can attack well, but he would kind of construct really good rallies, almost like play like a brick wall, and then when he got his chance, he would then finish you, and Unseong plays like that. But also, Lee Hyun-il was a little bit like that as well. One of the best movers in all of badminton, and I actually think the way that Unseong is playing, I think there's definitely been some influence from him in her game. Obviously, she already kind of had that, and he's probably building on it. But I wrote here, she was in the first game being very proactive. She played with incredible variety. Her accuracy on the attack was something that was up by a massive point. I mean, criticisms of Unseong sometimes when I've seen her is when she's attacking, it is quite central. Obviously, that means she doesn't make mistakes, but it also doesn't apply as much pressure as possible to her opponents. In this final, especially in the opening game, her accuracy was absolutely on point. She was obviously doing similar things to what worked against Yamaguchi. She was pushing on the front court, and there was just constant presence and pressure. This was the thing that I mentioned that was lacking a little bit when she played the World Championships, that she was almost just getting the shuttle over. In this final and then in this tournament, when she was really on it, she was playing with a real kind of goal in mind. Like I said, I think in the last video or something, I was talking about Unseong, she's very good at, she maintains, like, she gets like a slight advantage, and each shot she adds like maybe 1% of advantage up and up and up until obviously the pressure becomes too much. She's not someone that like a Tai Ying who can pull out something absolutely brilliant like regularly and can go from like a rally where you're 50-50 and suddenly it leaps like this. Unseong is very much more methodical and kind of slowly applies more pressure. It's like being in a vice and gradually being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Now, obviously, in the second game, because the first game, I think it was like 5 to Unseong, it was an absolute blitzing. And then as we got to the second game, it almost seemed like a reversal. Obviously, Wang Ziyi was playing on the slower end. She started to attack more. She had a little bit more confidence. She was playing a little bit faster. And it seemed like we were going to go to a third game. I think it was 18-10 to Wang Ziyi. And then Unseong kind of, I don't know, she could have easily just gone, right, okay, let's like not completely roll over, but let's focus on the third. But clearly she was like, no, I'm still in this. And so she fought really, really hard, and she was able to come back. And she worked incredibly hard because, in all honesty, I think bar maybe the last rally, the rally she actually won, where she played more clears or shots to the backcourt in that rally than she did from 18-10 down up to whatever it was, 22-21 or 23-22. Because obviously with the faster haul, she was having to work really hard. She only really used the rear court if she was in a really good position. Like the occasional clear, but from the front, if she was really high up, then she felt she could play the back. If she was slightly low or slightly behind, she was down, 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 down. And that is an incredibly brutal way to play badminton. You could see she was bent over double. She was working so hard, but she clung in there. Now, I must also say, I think a big part in what helped Unseong win was, I think Wang Ziyi had another one of her Wang Ziyi moments. We've seen her do that against Unseong this year, I think at the All England, when she went from being a set and a game and something up and being in pretty good and then suddenly fading. We've seen her do that in other tournaments as well against different opposition. She can have these little lapses, these little moments. I think the main focus should be on what a great performance, what a digging deep kind of moment it was for Seong. They're absolutely brilliant, very well deserved. And she was even able to do it when she took a kind of like nasty slip at 18-all. She still stuck with it. She, like I said, worked incredibly hard and was very deserved of her title. Last thing I want to talk about, I've already mentioned talking about what a difference a year can make, that we've seen. Obviously, the BKA in itself has completely turned around, not just by having a different chairman or a different head coach, but I know that some of the approaches they've allowed players to have their own sponsors. We've certainly seen players playing with Yonex and players playing with Victor. We saw that in the women's doubles, 2 pairs with 2 different sponsors. We've never seen it before. I've just heard today that the China Badminton League, Sir Sun Jae is a player that's been invited. That's obviously something that would have had to get approval, when obviously maybe in the old system, maybe might not have got. So clearly, like, we talk about Eun Se-young. I think she's got her own personal sponsorship deal outside of the organisation. Lots of things have changed, but maybe I mean, I know a lot of discussions about, An Seong hasn't had as dominant a year. She still had a really good year. And people have kind of put it down towards, I know at the Worlds, there was talk about she put too much pressure on herself. She was trying to play too perfect. And she's even admitted that at this tournament, she wanted to come in and enjoy her badminton. And you could kind of see that she's still fighting between, in that balance between enjoying and relaxing, but also, having to be very serious and working really hard and really putting it there. It's quite a fine balance to sometimes to kind of weigh out and marry up. But I think another thing actually is because of all the changes, we have to understand that for someone like An Seung, that might take some time to getting used to. Park Ju-bong is going to be a different head coach. He's much more hands-on. We know what he did with Japan. He's sat behind the court a lot more. Obviously, he's going to have a lot of input. We've already heard what he said, his opinions of An Seung in terms of she needs to be a little bit more aggressive. And obviously, the way An Seung plays, that isn't necessarily natural to her. So that's going to take a little bit of time. Obviously, Lee Hyun-il's come in. He's going to have his own opinions. So it's going to take a little time, I think, for her to adjust. Obviously, she's adjusting pretty well and stuff. But it just, like I said, combined with everything that's gone on, the difference we've seen in a year, we've had the Denmark 2024 and 2025. I already said it's like night and day. But I think on part of that, we need to we might see a few more tournaments where we might not see the best An Seung because maybe she's obviously a fantastic player and will be able to kind of adapt and take on really well. But at the same time, whenever there's any changes or lots of things and you're trying to take that on board, I mean, then I think it can sometimes cause odd performance dips, or maybe it could explain why we're not seeing the best An Seung all the time. I mean, I could just be missing the mark here, but that's kind of something that I thought no one's really spoken of that, and I just wanted to kind of lay that out here. But yeah, no, fantastic performance for An Seong, very well deserved. Congratulations on completing the Super 750s. And for me, it was just great that she's enjoying her badminton and also that she's obviously got a team behind her that she really believes in. And that's great because we were sat here last year thinking, is she going to, is this it? Is she going to retire, or is she going to try and move away from go independent or whatever? Especially when BK announced that they would allow players to enter tournaments outside of the National Association. Would An Seong, as the bridge has been burned too much? But clearly, relationships have been reformed, and it's absolutely brilliant to see. So let's move on